Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of June 18th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, an exclusive interview with Arlene Dickinson, legendary entrepreneur, founding dragon on CBC's Dragon's Den, veteran investor, and CEO of District Ventures based in Calgary. After working together several years ago during my days at the Shopping Channel, Arlene and I catch up and chat about her latest series of investments at District Ventures, focusing on startups in the food category, taking them onto retailers' shelves with an innovative listing deal with Circle K convenience stores. Next, I sit down with Michele Sexsmith, SVP and Practice Leader, Retail, Real Estate, and Entertainment Sectors from Environics Analytics, talking about the marketing mix for retailers and how to leverage digital to amplify, personalize, and measure customers and customer segments in and around your retail stores and more. Last but not least, I'll cover off retail this week, including a sweet smell of success for Sage, RYU Founders' Love of Tribes, Giant Tiger breaks new ground, Dollarama back on the growth path, IKEA turns a Paris subway into a glorious showroom, Amazon's private label products bestseller in 22 categories, Walmart deals with Ellen, hot rental trends and the customers that use them, Shades of Grey, Vancouver Cannabis Edition, Choom Cannabis opens with great fanfare in Niagara Falls, Canada, Canna Cabana in Toronto opens up, Shoppers offers same-day delivery in Ontario, and edible laws finalized and ready for on-shelf around December. But first, let's listen to my interview with Arlene Dickinson.
Arlene, welcome to the Voice of Retail. Thanks so much for making time to join me this morning. How are you doing?
I'm great, Mike. Thanks for including me. I'm excited about speaking with you today about all things retail.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, many would know. It's funny because usually when I chat with people, I have them introduce themselves. But so to speak, the cliche is true, needs no introduction. But, many would know you on your role on Dragon's Den and see you associated with entrepreneurial campaigns. And you've got a great podcast, The Business of Life. But let's talk about District Ventures. Fewer people might know about that. So tell me about District Ventures, its mission, objective, and how does it work, and all those great details.
Okay, great. Well, District Ventures is a venture capital fund that I think is the new type of venture capital fund. We're a fund that invests in predominantly Canadian consumer goods companies in the food and beverage, health and wellness, and beauty spaces. So what we do is we look for early stage companies that are starting to show some traction and growth, and we invest capital in them. But what's unique about us is that we also have an accelerator program for, even more early stage companies that helps with programming and mentorship and marketing support. We have a fully formed marketing team that specializes in consumer goods, and then we have a commercial kitchen that hasn't actually been even announced yet. That's going to be added to what we're doing. So, this is an early advance notice that we also have added a commercial kitchen to that. So we have a very interesting ecosystem that is robust in the way we think about helping these companies grow. And we're all about taking Canadian companies and making them big through not just Canadian distribution and sales, but also into the global market and through export.
I love the fact that you're opening the commercial kitchen. It must be one of those things that is the transition point for small ideas to become bigger, is to commercialize the product that they're making, going from whatever they're doing today to not just the marketing and other support, but actually the process support that takes it to the next level.
It's so true. I mean, listen, everybody everywhere thinks about innovation as something that is pure technology driven, right? It's all about building software or apps or some sort of a digital platform. But the reality is that innovation has to happen across all industries and all sectors. And in particular, in the food and health consumer sectors, you need to support and encourage entrepreneurs who are thinking about new types of products, new types of ways of taking things to market, new ways of meeting consumer demands and needs. And so if you're not focused on that stage, you end up losing that kind of really important aspect of the entire chain, the entire supply chain, which is when you think about supply, you think about product and ingredients, but I am thinking about supply in terms of making sure that we're always fostering and encouraging and supporting ideas and ideation in the space. And then you can follow on with capital, you can follow on with mentorship, you can follow on with programming, then you get into mass distribution, and then you get into export. So these are the things that, require a lot of heavy lifting to build the infrastructure, but are well worth it.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of decoupling elements of the value chain, right? So helping these entrepreneurs figure out all the different parts of that value chain, from the bright idea to all those different moving parts. Now, this is just reading on the site. You talk about you do 2 tranches a year. Is it? Is that your objective?
In the Accelerator program, we do 2 cohort programs a year. Okay. And those programs have anywhere from 5 to 15 companies that go through the programming. The companies get a small capital and investment in exchange for some equity of their company, and then they go through the programming. So they get, programming and finance, legal, distribution, sales, safety, export, accounting, you name it. They get all sorts of programming. They get to work with each other, and then they go out. The fund itself operates, of course, on a deployed capital basis. So we're constantly, deploying capital, and it is looking at larger scale companies and supporting them and growing them.
And based in Calgary, is it solely based in Calgary? Do entrepreneurs travel to Calgary to do this work, or is there some virtual element too?
So it's headquartered in Calgary. Mm-hmm. It is a national accelerator. It's the only one of its kind in the country. And then we also, the kitchen, we will be also offering the programming out east as well now. So with a physical space out east. But right now the cohorts they travel to Calgary 1 week a month, and they, get the programming for that 1 week. But we will be putting in teleconferencing facilities so that people can virtually attend from anywhere, so that we can encourage and use technology to the best of our capabilities to expand the program as broadly as we can.
So stepping back just a half a step, you talked about looking at food, beverage, health, beauty. I saw there's actually a couple of years ago a pet food as well. So why the focus on that area for you? Is that an interest of yours? Like, there's a lot of other things you could have focused on in terms of looking for consumer products. So why that particular focus?
Well, listen, Canada is a country that's known as for a couple things. I mean, we certainly are a nation that has been known for our production and distribution, and that's a different podcast of energy. But we also have an enormous amount of expertise and skills and capacity in the agricultural and health spaces. And that demonstrates itself in terms of our ag tech, the things we grow in agriculture, our global reputation in terms of ingredients that are top quality, that are traceable, because food traceability is so important. Food security and food safety are becoming global issues. And Canada has an enormous amount of expertise there. But what we do, and what we traditionally have done as a nation, is we've taken that expertise in health innovation and health ideas and technology and products, and we have taken the kind of the basis of it. So think about, we grow the best, let's say canola. We grow the best canola in the world, right? Yep. What do? We ship that canola to somewhere else, and they turn it into a product, and then we buy it back. Mm-hmm. And you can go that through wheat, through almost any of our raw commodities. We're really good at exporting raw commodities into other markets, letting those nations turn them into products, and then buying them back. And I think, what I saw was this convergence. I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but I saw this convergence of people really starting to think about their health and how the efficacy of what they consumed was actually directly linked to their health. So that was happening. So food and health were starting to converge. We saw this global trend on how are we going to feed the globe? How are we going to make sure people have access to healthy, good, safe, high-quality products? And then we saw this global trend around food safety, food traceability. At the same time we saw that, we saw Canada as a nation becoming more and more expert in thinking about food safety and food traceability. We already know we have a global reputation as it relates to the quality and the caliber of the ingredients that we produce here and grow here. And we already know that we had expertise in ag and health. And so as a marketer and as a strategist, those things collided for me. And it felt like everybody's chasing technology. Everybody's thinking about the next app. Everybody's thinking about the next software tool, and
right.
nobody was thinking about taking advantage of. And when I say taking advantage, I don't mean in a negative way. I mean in a positive way, leveraging and supporting the food and health space and sectors. And so that's why I selected here. Warren Buffett, if it was good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So,
well, it's a familiar. It seems to be a familiar refrain. I had an interview and chatted with Sylvain Charlebois, who focuses a lot on food, and I wrote an article about the new Canada's food guide, and the proposition was that did the Canada's food guide capture the sense and essence of what people were thinking about now, and or would it form how people think about eating? And the answer to that for both of us was yes. In other words, people seem to be more thoughtful about what they're eating. You see that in this whole rise of plant-based meat alternative products that seem to be having a moment. We'll see how that lasts. But that's a good segue into a question about, you must be, I think you just closed a cohort for this year, so you must see a lot of proposals. And from those, are you seeing any trends that you can divine or something that's caught your attention? I just got back from Vancouver. I was in the Global Products Summit. The world came to Vancouver to talk about global products, and certainly plant-based alternatives was probably number one on the lips of everyone. That and sustainability issues. But what are you seeing in the people that are in front of you, vying to be supported by District Ventures?
We see a lot of, I guess the trends would be around functionality. Like, is this doing more than just satisfying a craving? Is it actually satisfying a body need I have relative to my health? So functionality, and that translates into clean ingredient decks. Transparent packaging is very big. Can I see what I'm buying? The less packaging, less waste as a result in terms of kind of what's going on. So consumers want less packaging. They want transparent packaging. They want food and beverages and health products that are functional for them. So it's no longer okay just to think about drinking water. You need water that's somehow fortified is kind of a trend, whether it's water, whether it's oat milk today, whether it's, gone from almond milk to oat milk. There's all of these things kind of come back to this growing trend of artisanal, closer to home, understanding where it's come from, not feeling that it's mass-produced in a way that actually is full of additives. And so people are looking for things that are clear, transparent, honest, and healthful. And I think that in total is a trend. It doesn't mean that people aren't still looking for confectionery type things that are, once in a while having a chocolate or a candy. But even that chocolate and candy is being asked to be a little more honest about kind of what it's delivering and have less sugar potentially and have, more ingredients that are healthy. So I'd say in general. Yeah.
And to your point, more accountability around where the core products come from, right? The
100%.
The sustainability around it, or the fairness of it, the fair tradeness of it. So you bring up a couple of ideas. This you mentioned, technology around blockchain, or at least food traceability, and now you're talking about ingredients that have or foods that have additional benefit. And my mind goes to this time next year, where I think we'll be in a world where Canada has legalized edibles and cannabis. I would suspect you might see one or two proposals in that line. Have you seen anything so far? Are you hearing rumblings along that line?
We do see deals in that sector. As a fund, we don't invest in that sector. So, it is a very specialized investment, I believe, and it's a regulatory environment that is still evolving. Right. And so, from my view as an investor for the fund, it's very important that we think about making sure that it's well understood. Right. I don't think we're there yet, so no, we don't invest there. Yeah, early days.
Well, let's talk about you've got a go-to-retail strategy, which I think is unique, and you already do work with Sunterra. I think you've got a number of products in with Sunterra, something like almost 24 from your ventures, and now you've got a deal with Circle K, right? Something like 400 locations in Ontario. Let's talk about that for a while. How did that come about, and tell me the background and what that's meant to accomplish.
Well, as I said earlier, I think the entire kind of thinking about how a venture fund is structured and what it offers its investee companies is really changing. And for us, we wanted to make sure that we could help with distribution in a meaningful way. And many of these companies, they can go from, perhaps several $1 million in business to, tens of millions of dollars in business simply because they were able to get into distributors that they may not have been able to on their own. So establishing these relationships has been paramount to me. And, Centera was the early kind of participant in supporting us through the accelerator at the fund level and the accelerator level, Circle K. And we had a conversation around how we might be able to create something that was very Canadian and help these companies grow. It's been a huge success. I mean, I can't say enough about that relationship and how having convenience like that for the consumer and having it readily identified as a Canadian product has already turned the dial up significantly for these companies. And then we're also looking at other very interesting global relationships that we're establishing, as well as other national relationships. So we are going to work to make District Ventures a predominant and a readily available purveyor of these brands that we are investing in. We believe in these brands. We think they're worth supporting. And we're lucky that we've got companies like Circle K and companies like Centera and, others that are helping support us. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, you couldn't have a better partner than the Couche-Tard and Circle K there. They bring, for those, and my listeners would know them, but they bring such a global perspective. But, I don't imagine that they're easily convinced. They guard their shelf space pretty jealously. They don't just let anyone on those shelves. Give me a sense of, I guess, in terms of advice to the retailers listening and to other folks listening. What advice do you have when to retailers and people who are listing products to think about how to differently, I guess, about listing products and how to pitch retailers and how to be pitched, I suppose. What worked? What was so compelling to the folks at Circle K? Because it's a great backstory for sure, but, they want shelf space productivity and all the usual metrics that go along with it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I think that what works for Circle K is that we are able to provide a volume of innovation. So, we can be the partner that works with them to bring them, dozens of different innovative ideas versus one or two. And so when you're an individual trying to get into these retailers, it can be difficult because they don't know whether you can deliver the volume. They don't know if you can scale with them. They don't know if they aren't, they don't want to do the due diligence on whether or not they do the due diligence, but it's hard for them because they can only do so much of it as an organization. So we provide that. We do the due diligence. We do the work. We make sure that they are scalable. We make sure that they can deliver. And then we help them with, their retail presence through packaging. So we provide to Circle K, I think, and to Centera and any other retailer that works with us, a kind of ready-on switch that is a funnel of innovation as opposed to a separate individual piece of innovation. And so I think that's helpful. For the individuals that are trying to do it, though, you've got to think about how you're going to support it. It's one thing to get on shelf. It's another thing to get off shelf. And this is so true, right? Everyone.
Sell in versus sell out. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got to move it, man. You see so many that they I'm in 2,000 doors, and you go, great. What are you doing to get them, picked up? Because they get delisted very quickly. To your point, the retailer can't afford to have space that's not productive. Yeah. And so learning that and understanding how you're going to support the product placement. And then on the retailer side, I would say that, for the retailers that are listening to this, there is a way to support the Canadian ecosystem of innovation by being a little bit gentler on listing fees, by being a little bit gentler on expectations, by providing shelf space that is specifically for Canadian innovation, that is trying to support, the type of businesses that will actually help drive what I think is consumer demand right now in this area, and they can be at the forefront of that. But they can't expect to treat them the same way as they treat the multinational conglomerates who want that shelf space. So they have to think about them differently and treat them differently.
I like the way you've, so to speak, squared the circle, because you kind of walk into a listing meeting with the assurances that this startup is actually backed and can produce. I mean, that's one of the first questions that the merchants ask is, I love your product. Can you make me 10,000 by the end of the ticket time period? And then can you get them on my shelf? And then what are you going to do to make sure we work together, hopefully, to pull those through, right? To get that next order, that all important next order, right? It's that second order to me often that is the tipping point to the next big relationship. So it's a really interesting model, because you not only, every retailer is looking for product innovation, and they're looking for something different to break out of the homogenous listings from everyone else. And you need, to your point, almost back to the beginning, you need, that baseline of snacks and other products that are, just have a global demand. But that innovation is so interesting. Well, that's,
and I think,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I get so excited about this. I apologize. I could talk about it forever, but I'm sorry if I'm talking too long. But I think I want to add one point to what you just said. The other difference is that because of the fund, we can help fund them through that growth. So many of them might have a great idea. They go into a retailer. They say, we want 10,000. They go, great. Now they can't get financing. They can't get working capital to help finance the inventory that they have just been asked to deliver. And it's very difficult, very, very difficult. So my next kind of plea out there is to financial institutions to say that, these companies that have POs and inventory requirements need capital. And that, supporting them at that stage, that early growth stage, is really critical. As a fund, that's what we do. We help them through the growth curve. But I can tell you that there's a cliff out there in Canada relative to be able to find financing for growth.
Yes, it's for sure a real constraint. But it sounds like you're doing amazing work to both facilitate entrepreneurs, which I know you love. It's one of your passions, but also take these things to market. So I congratulate you on a great, alternative or disruptive, so to speak, view of the value chain. So fantastic. It's great to hear. One last question, and it's about your podcast and podcasting in general. So I'm kind of switching gears on you a little bit.
Sure.
Podcasting seems to be having a moment right now. You've got a great podcast, yourself and Jan Arden. You've done podcasts before. Curious, what do you think it is about this moment that podcasts are having today? Is it something unique about the technology, or is it something unique about what people and how people are consuming media? So I'm kind of tapping into the media side of your insights for a few seconds.
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, the on-demand viewing and listening that's going on is directly correlated and related to the busy lives that we're all leading, and the more and more singular lives we're leading. Right? There's more and more time spent alone. There's more and more time spent in front of a small screen that it can't be shared with somebody else. So we're consuming media I was actually just thinking about this morning, that we consume media far differently. We used to sit in front of a TV set and, 4 or 5 of us could watch the same program at the same time, or even 2 or 3 of us. Now we sit in front of a small screen, not as easily shareable, much more in tune with what we want to watch and the time and place we want to watch at. And so we're consuming media in a very different way. And I think this is reflective of kind of society in general. Like we're downsizing in our own internal kind of ability to think, because we're consumed by media. Everywhere we look, there's ads, there's something going on. So we're trying to be selective about what we're going to spend our time with, because our time is so rare, but also our time is a bit more, I think, individual. And all of that, I think, is leading to podcasts. Podcasts are, where do you have you don't really have time to talk to people as much anymore. You're not socializing the same as we used to. Even restaurants are going down in terms of numbers of people. The millennial generation is more likely to have people over to their home. They're less likely to go out and socialize, right? Gen Z, the same. So I think that you're seeing podcasts are a way to learn, to feel like you have some instant connection with somebody because you're actually hearing their voice. You're feeling like you're in the room with them versus not. And I think that human connection is why podcasts are really starting to come into their own because people are craving it and they're finding it by listening and being able to at least feel like they're hearing another voice. Many times people are going through their day now. They don't even interact anymore. They work from home. They watch on their own screens. They do everything alone, right? That sounds like a dire state.
It's like the unintended consequences of the connection between technology and individualism and the ability. You're so right about watching. Even I think of Netflix in my house. There could be 4 different things being watched from the same Netflix account in the same house by the 4 people in my house, and similar to podcasts. So it's an interesting perspective. I think it also has I wanted to touch on it because I think it has a broader impact on how marketers and retailers think about reaching out to people in the myriad of different ways through media fragmentation.
It does. I mean, if you think about what Jan and I are doing with the Business of Life, with our podcast, the constant, we sit and talk as friends. We literally, you'll appreciate this, we literally sit down and just talk. We don't have agendas. We just talk.
Yeah, it's a great discussion. I listen to it all the time because it's just such a frank discussion between 2 friends. I love the format. Thanks.
But what's interesting about it, the feedback we get is that people say exactly what you said, which is, I feel like I'm the third friend in the room. I feel like I'm having my own thoughts on what you're talking about. I don't always agree. I find myself, yelling at the at my AirPods or whatever I'm listening to, and wanting to contribute to the conversation. And you make me think about things differently. And isn't that is just like you're doing? Isn't that the most rewarding part of podcasting? Is that you can offer out opinions and people can consume it and choose to either agree or disagree. But it's a very good discourse because it's not like social media where there's hatred and all the, horrible things being said. People can consume it in their own minds and determine what they want to do with it or listen or not. And I think that, I hope we hold on to that with podcasting, that we don't find a way for true interaction in a way that's going to create the negativity that's on some social media.
It's such an interesting perspective. Arlene, thanks so much for you've been so generous with your time. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. Wish you continued success with District Ventures, and perhaps I'll have you back on in the months and years to come to learn more about the products and the innovations and what you're learning about retail. So once again, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for the interest in what we're doing and for having me on.
Michele, welcome back to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, it's an interesting day today. There's some kind of sporting event celebration happening today in Toronto, so I'm thrilled to be able to make it my way here to be able to chat to you today.
I'm glad you were able to make it with the throngs out there. It's an exciting day.
It's history in the making. It's also a historically big parade. But anyway, let's talk about other types of history. When I talk to retailers from coast to coast, a number of themes come up. And one of the themes comes up is understanding their marketing mix and understanding how complicated it can be to be a marketer. They have questions about flyers. They have questions about, do they continue flyers? Do they use other digital? How do they measure digital? And what are you hearing from retailers? And how do you see marketing strategies evolving in retail and with your clients?
What we see in general is a definite move to digital, but at the same time a reevaluation of all of the media channels. A lot of clients are starting to understand that not all their consumers are the same, and to assume that all of their consumers are on a specific social media channel is probably an overstatement. Everybody's got their preferences for how they receive information, where they go for review information, where they go for information. So it's important to be able to segment the customers into those key segments and then to understand their specific media preferences. I'll take an example. Maybe a millennial group might be more active in some types of social media, but they might be using a range of other media in that combination. So you think about people commuting to work with long commutes, families in the suburbs coming into the city. That commuting radio time is often the key way that marketers can get that message across to that audience very cost effectively. That same type of audience out of home, they're going to be exposed to quite a bit along that way. But when those families get home at the end of the day, there's still often a need for additional information. And so sometimes, in some cases, flyers are a great way to provide that full brand story to a consumer to tell more about the product. So it's really important to have those decisions on where to spend that money based on as much information as possible. And at Environics, we do provide that type of data to understand all of those different audiences and what their specific preferences are.
You hit on a real interesting thing, which is the use of flyers. I mentioned it in kind of my introductory comments. Retailers are struggling or trying to figure out, with the dynamics that are going on in the flyer industry, about how things get delivered. But they're also struggling with a lot of data, right? There's, we hear big data, and there's a lot of content and data out there. How do retailers harness all these things there's so many points of presence? Media is so fragmented. How do retailers start thinking about big data in a meaningful way?
Well, it all depends on what information they've got available to them. There certainly are some very large organizations that have very strong first-party data where they do have transaction information, where they've got a very established loyalty program. But very often, even with an established loyalty program, there's only a certain portion where there's enough history for that first-party data to be able to tell a story. So maybe 20% of that data may be strong enough to understand multiple purchases, frequency of purchase cycles, that product mix that consumer is buying. But when we talk with retailers, we find that often 80% or more of that loyalty program doesn't have enough data points to be really useful in that way. So it needs to be supplemented, and that's where third-party data comes into play. So this could be information that we provide, such as demographics or lifestyle, or even expenditures in the categories of goods to help them to understand, is this a consumer that's going to be interested in certain types of products or services based on who they are in that database to begin with.
So you talked about loyalty. Let's explore that for a while. So, you make the great point that just because you have a loyalty program doesn't mean people are loyal to you. Those are two very different things. So you may not be, and likely are not, even in the best customer, capturing all of their purchase behavior. So you don't always understand their the potential for your business, right? So, and many companies, many retailers have loyalty programs, but not all. In whether it's a coalition or having your own program, those things can be expensive to run. There's great value to them, but there's still kind of a scale issue. What's your advice around loyalty programs in terms of the data they deliver and other ways to get that same kind of data, with or without a loyalty program?
Well, certainly it's important to have a loyalty program, to have that known customer instead of just looking at just metrics for number of people that are, walking through the turnstiles or whatever they might be. So it is important to have that information and to extend it as much as possible. But there's that need to supplement with other information so that you've got that complete picture. With loyalty data, you certainly understand that portion that are coming into your doors that are identifying, self-identifying, but it still leaves a vast unknown quantity of consumers that are more casual shoppers that you need to dig deeper and to understand other characteristics around those. So we've been, over the last couple of years, doing quite an extensive work using mobile data analytics to help fill part of that gap. So this uses opt-in mobile apps from hundreds of thousands of data sources in order to provide a picture of those more casual types of consumers. So this would allow us to say, okay, a mobile device entered this location. The most common evening location from a neighborhood standpoint comes from this particular location. And then we can overlay the demographics, the lifestyle, the expenditures of that neighborhood to understand more about that consumer type.
So we're not, unpack that a little for me, because I know retailers love the idea of being able to know their customer better, even from something as simple as asking their postal code, right? Which is a great way to, even if you don't have a loyalty program, if you just ask their postal code, you can put that information to a great amount of use. But what you're describing is a way that is buried within the mobile devices, yet not to the individual. You're still at this phone mostly originates from this particular neighborhood, therefore your customer probably looks like this. Is that a fair interpretation?
That's a fair interpretation. So it's a device that's moving. It's a hashed ID, so it's still privacy friendly. The mobile app that has the geolocate services is part of the user terms and conditions. We agreed to share that geolocation. And so that allows that combination of all of those devices across an area, and then we can look at a physical stores for walls and then identify what types of visitors are coming into those four walls. So they're coming into that lat long that defines that polygon for that store, and then we can then see where do those devices, where do they most likely
cluster or wind
cluster
up,
exactly.
Right?
So the common evening location is in this neighborhood, and so we can start to see that the trade area for the store has a certain size and shape. And so that's based on real data to understand those types of characteristics. And then with the neighborhood of those points of origin, we can start to understand, okay, this is a 35 to 55-year-old type of consumer with a family, and we've got all of the other attributes around that neighborhood that we can overlay on top of that.
So that's already pre-existing data and pre-existing segmentation. So location gives you a sense of who those people are.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And what's interesting about that is retailers who, we're in downtown Toronto today, so a percentage of people live here, but a percentage of people just shop here and they live back home, right? Their workers, their commute. So that really gives them a better sense of who their people are in those areas, for sure, right?
Absolutely. You're taking even an event like today's event. All of those mobile devices are in that area. You could actually get a handle on who those consumers are that are cheering on their team. So it has all kinds of applications. So
that, I guess, when retailers think about alternatives to loyalty programs, for some retailers, a loyalty program is, they're at a size, mid-sized to small, that it's just not practical because having their own loyalty program, they don't get enough frequency. Being part of a larger one is just not really an option for them. So this then can really help their marketing mix by helping infuse what they're doing with data and insights without having to license plate every purchase with a loyalty program. Is that what you're hearing? Is that the retailers?
That is absolutely the use case. It really helps with that understanding with all kinds of situations. So you think about as maybe an existing retailer is changing different elements within their stores. They might be experimenting with different merchandise mix in a few pilot locations and want to understand the consumers that are purchasing that information or at least shopping more frequently. So there's the ability to look at the time frame for that mobile data to provide that further insight. So who is the consumer shopping beforehand? Who's the consumer given this change that went on in the stores? So the retailer can make that decision. Are they moving in the right direction or not? Do they need to roll that program out? Is it fitting that audience that they're really targeting? So it helps to reduce the risk with all of those types of major decisions.
So what you're really talking about is it's like promotional planning and promotional execution and measurement in such a robust way, because as opposed to putting in a new merchandising assortment or store, guessing on whether it's going to be successful, you can not only predict, but you can also then measure with this kind of geo-targeting, geo-fencing, as you called it, right?
Yes. And so that really allows a lot of flexibility around whatever that new strategy might be. Certainly there's been a lot of discussion with, how are the baby boomers aging out, and does that impact all kinds of businesses because maybe they'll be spending less. It really allows that type of deeper analytics to understand, is that really what's happening or not? Do we really want to change and try to shift our marketing to a younger audience? Is that going to be effective or not? And have the metrics to be able to prove that very early on with a few types of pilot campaigns.
You're talking about the depth of metrics. I'm curious how deep your metrics go. Like, how many data points do you have, and how many segments do you have? Like, how rich is that data, and is it coast to coast?
So the mobile data is coast to coast. It's international, so it does help even with cross-border types of effects as well. but it is a sample of the population. So the percent penetration is between 5 and 10%. But with the work that we've done and the testing we've done, comparing it to very strong loyalty programs, we know that it does produce a very similar result to those strong loyalty programs because it does provide very similar metrics for trade areas at retail stores, very similar metrics for the consumer profile of those visitors to stores, and basically replicate some of the analytics that are available through loyalty programs.
And your customer segmentation, that's called PRISM, is
Yes.
that right? And how many segments are there in that? That's not half a dozen or so. That's pretty robust, right?
It is pretty robust, yeah. I mean, Canada is a very diverse country. So there's 68 different PRISM types that cover that full range across Canada, everything from urban to rural to small towns and rural locations. And then it covers that full mix of families, singles, empty nesters, everything in between. Some of the segments are francophone segments because the behaviors are very different, the shopping habits are very different. And new Canadians, we track that information to get a handle on where are they settling, where are they expanding, where are they moving. So it provides that full framework to understand all of the people in, say, a retailer's trading area. So they've got that full perspective to understand, are they getting their fair share of that market, or are they really focused on particular subsegments within that local retail mix?
I was looking at some of the data that we talked about in our last episode where it looked at, trucks and trade and digital digerati, the urban. And it was such interesting. I've looked at it a couple of times where you look at online shopping and index this or triangulate this with pickup online and what to offer, pick up in store and what to offer from online shopping. And you had the trucks and trade just so active, over-indexing in almost every single category in terms of online shopping, except one or two, and that was grocery. But then on the other side, you had your digital digerati, your singles, no kids, indexing on everything except automotive. So it really was, to me, illustrative of how to give a sense by store where those people are and what to offer them. It was interesting. When I think of online grocery shopping, it was clear where not to offer that,
right,
and then where it was a great opportunity to offer that. So that's intersecting with that kind of segmentation. But then you can also help retailers in terms of promotions and all those other things too, right?
Yeah, so it provides that full picture of that consumer. What are they doing online, offline? What are their media preferences? Where do they live, so you can find more of that segment of the population that really loves your brand. So it really helps with understanding all of the ways of communicating so that there's a more personalized experience at the end of the day.
Well, let's pick up on that last point just as we wrap up kind of last questions. This media mix idea, that where you can help retailers decide which media to put in which market. Is that what this can help them with as well?
Yes, we've done a lot of work with retailers, as you mentioned before, that move from flyers, and should they stay with flyers? Should they move into digital? Should they be doing a completely different combination? And we do have the data at the neighborhood level to be able to say this is a neighborhood that really prefers direct mail offers and responds at a very high rate. Here's another neighborhood that wouldn't consider looking at direct mail and are totally into digital. And then we'll see all kinds of other neighborhoods that are really using a mix of very different elements and are using all of that in order to inform their key decisions. And we do have the information to say, what types of media are they using for key decisions like appliances versus a more typical purchase, maybe in apparel.
Now you've been doing this for a long time, looking at this different segmentation, different media types. Anything surprise you, or anything that you see today in terms of how all this mix is evolving? Is it evolving as fast as you thought, faster than you thought, or some for example often say, I thought flyers would be gone by now, printed flyers would be gone by now. I was never a big believer in that because I like the experience of printed flyers, and even though I've got an app like Flip, I still like to kind of look through physical flyers. Anything surprise you or jump out at you in the work you do?
I think it's interesting to see that the evolution does take time. It's not a changeover from one year to the next. It's a slow evolution, but I mean slow over in say a 5-year period. Certainly, there's been quite a bit of change over the last few years, but it's not like flipping a switch. It's on or it's off. It's more like you can see maybe a steady decline in one area of media and a pickup in another one, and that's for one lifestyle type, as you mentioned, like maybe tools and trucks. But with another consumer segment, we might see a very different pattern that's evolving over time. So it's important to keep measuring that and to see what's happening and to look at the change year over year so that you know where those tipping points are starting to happen.
It's so helpful for retailers as they try to think about that marketing mix, where and how to move it, because it's not as much as the pace of things like technology and change happen, some things still remain the same. But for some groups it moves way faster, and others, it could be another decade or generation where they're still like their printed flyers. So, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for sharing what you're up to at Environics Analytics, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, thanks so much, Michael.
So special thanks to Arlene and Michele for being my guests this episode. Now let's hit the highlights from Retail This Week e-newsletter, biggest retail weekly e-newsletter in Canada. You can subscribe for free on retailcouncil.org, kind of a companion piece, as many of my listeners would know, to this podcast. So jumping right in, a great article on Sage Natural Wellness. The team there, the LeBlancs, coincidentally, so we knew they'd be successful, have done a great job in building a national and international brand. And there's a quote here, this is from the Globe and Mail, it's a quote here from Doug Stevens, who talks about himself being a fan and really likes them and at the corner of two important trends. So check that article out. It's a great business, and they're really doing so well across Canada. Giant Tiger breaks ground on new Ottawa headquarters. So the folks at Giant Tiger, led by Thomas Haig and the team, are opening up a brand new head office in Ottawa on Walkley Road. This from Grocery Business, and part of that, they're really on a tear, doing a fantastic job, committing to open 10 to 12 stores per year across Canada. So Giant Tiger doing a great job. I was in a Giant Tiger a couple of weeks ago, picking up some things, and such a well merchandised store, and their secret sauce, so to speak, with their model and their local owners that or franchisees or partners that know the neighborhood so well. So really, congratulations to Giant Tiger. French skincare brand Caldel, don't know if I'm pronouncing that even remotely correctly, but let's go with it, to open multi-level Caldel house on Hazelton Avenue. This from Retail Insider, Craig Patterson's weekly, I should say daily e-newsletter. It's a combined retail and spa space, so check that out. Dollarama back on the growth path with higher traffic and sales. So they haven't had, according to this article, in which this article is from the Globe and Mail, they haven't had traffic growth in more than a year, but reversed the tide with the latest quarter ending May 5th, posting a surprise 5.8%, that's huge, growth in comp store sales, more than twice what analysts expected. So congratulations to our friends from Montreal and Dollarama. What else have we got? So IKEA, this great article here from Fast Company. IKEA took a Paris subway station and literally decorated the walls like a showroom. It's really spectacular, so do check that out. It's a great visual. It's probably easier seen than described, but congratulations for IKEA to continue to be so innovative around their marketing mix. Amazon now has 2,000 Amazon Basic products, up from zero not too many years ago. Apparently, they count for about $7.5 billion of their 232.9, called $233 billion in 2018, according to analysts. I'm not sure. I guess that's pulling apart their data. Now, apparently, in 51 categories they participate, their items are bestsellers in 22 of them. So anyway, great article here from Think Numbers, kind of breaks that down by category. I love the batteries and cords, actually, when you look at it. It's not... some of those things won't surprise you, but probably a couple of them will, so do check that out. Article here from Bloomberg. Walmart's deal with Ellen DeGeneres shows how much America has changed. Really, it's a great article and just captures the place and the time and how modern retail is partnering up across the spectrum with the likes of such amazing Ellen DeGeneres leading the way. They see it, they like it, they want it, they rent it. Great article here from New York Times talking about capturing that zeitgeist of people who are renting products, not just going to what you would think in terms of products as a basic television or entertainment unit, but they're renting almost everything in their apartment from the likes of Crate & Barrel and West Elm and the Loft Express. So real trend here. Where they, it's an interesting article because there's an integration with drop boxes at WeWork in terms of fashion. It's really quite a thing to watch. It's and that from an article in New York Times. New York from Dallas News. Neiman Marcus posted bigger loss. Not happy. They're not happy with the Neiman Marcus. Of course, just opened up their first Manhattan department store in Hudson Yards. So keep a close eye on them. It's good. Neiman's a solid business in general, but they are struggling under a fair bit of private equity debt, so that we'll keep a close eye on them. But of course, we wish them well. Moving on, a great article from the National Post. This from the National Post magazine, but I got a link to it in the article from Marcelo Leon, who's RYU, which stands for Respect Your Universe CEO. Great retailer, just talks about his love of tribes and their unique culture, so check that out. From the Halliburton Echo, some new downtown stores opening up with local-made products, so great local entrepreneurs. Shades of Grey shroud Vancouver's cannabis retail scene. So this is from Business Vancouver. It says that 37 cannabis stores operating in Vancouver are not legal, but there is a bunch that are legal, and they do focus on a couple of them. I've been into several of the cannabis stores in Vancouver. It's great to see. It's kind of a craft market, so we'll see how that market expands. And speaking of cannabis stores, retail cannabis stores, Choom opened up in not in St. Catharines, reported in the St. Catharines News, but in Niagara Falls. And everyone came out, local dignitaries, Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati, and city councilors joined everyone here. So it's a big deal, right? There's, it's not every day that new stores open in your community. So celebrating and congratulations to our friends at Choom. And Canna Cabana opens up what is described here in this City News article as the last of 5 legal pot shops in Toronto. Of course, for those who've been listening or those who've been paying attention to the Ontario scene, the Ontario government issued out 25 permits and just 25 permits for retailers to open. I think that about 7 of those 25 have not opened and in fact defaulted on about $50,000 of their deposit. But congratulations to Canna Cabana, great retailer, and they're a High Tide owned by Alberta's High Tide, and they have just opened their store on Yonge Street near College. Other things of note, Shoppers Drug Mart offers same-day delivery service in Ontario. So this is Shoppers Drug Mart, of course, part of the Loblaws group, and what they're doing is leveraging Instacart for themselves. It looks like a bit of a pilot, but to do over-the-counter OTC and grocery that they carry, and using Instacart to do same-day delivery as well. Last but certainly not least, cannabis edibles will be available for sale legally in mid-December. We kind of knew this was happening. I mean, this is not a surprise. The regulations have been released by Health Canada. They really look much like they did when the first release came several months ago for a consultation period. And the license holders must provide 60 days notice to Health Canada for their plan to sell the products. Distributors and retailers authorized by province will need time to purchase and obtain. Long way of saying that while they being cannabis edibles might be legal in mid-October, by the time they actually hit the shelves, if you do all that math, it's probably early to mid-December, just in time for Christmas and maybe a few presents under the tree. Maybe even a few cannabis cookies for Santa Claus as he comes down the chimney. All right, well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. You can also ask your favorite home devices, Amazon Echo, Google Home, to play the most recent edition. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of LeBlanc Company Inc., and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.